Thank you so much for joining us on our Wheel and Anchor webinar, Sicily, Malta, and the Aeolian Islands. Marvelous trip that we were scheduled to do this year, but of course we've had to put off. And so good morning to everybody else that's just joined us, Bob, Sandy in Toronto, and as well as Ingrid and John and Gail, and thank you all for joining us. So let's get started. So we keep you on your toes here. So just briefly, again, many of you have joined us for many webinars. Wheel and Anchor, all about bringing travelers together. When I started this little travel community a few years back, it was because I had a number of people who I had some fantastic experiences with. And what I realized, and perhaps the obvious, but when people of a like-minded view of the world and of travel get together, they just have a lot of fun. We always have a lot of fun on our trips. And so that's what we're about, is bringing travelers. And when we say travelers as well, you know, we're not tourists anymore. We've graduated. We're now really people who like to explore the world. And in that vein, my vision for each and every one of our members is to be well-traveled and well-connected, which, as you've heard me say before, is about taking the time, slowing the travel down a little bit. You've read a lot in the news about slow travel, and this is what it's about, taking the time to really experience, immerse yourselves in these places. And in doing so, we become connected to people that we meet along the way, other people from the communities that we visit, you know, our guides, and of course, our other members that we travel with. So that's what it's all about here at Wheel and Anchor. Joining me today on the webinar, my usual team, of course. I'm Gordon, founder of Wheel and Anchor. Joel and Paula are here on the webinar with me in the background and will answer any questions that or will help me to facilitate the answering of questions towards the end. And I know that you've spoken probably to Paula before, and we're a small team, but we're a strong team. Good, so let's jump right in a little bit, and just to give you the quick geography lesson, as I like to do, about our trip and where all these places are. Sicily, of course, being the boot of, being the ball, if you will, to Italy's boot. So it's an island that's just across this narrow channel that separates the Italian mainland, the European mainland, from Sicily. And then Malta, located just about 80 kilometers to the south of Sicily, between there and the North African coast. And of course, this location means that the temperatures here are quite temperate. I mean, we're going in May anyway, so it'll already be quite warm in both Sicily and Malta. And these islands have, you know, what's formed these islands are, of course, the volcanic activity. And we'll see some of that as we make our way down on this trip. We'll pass a number of different volcanoes and we'll see the geological impact that has. And Malta is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. And that being said, you know, it's really densely populated, but I recall having been there, there's still some beautiful spots that you can go on the island without feeling crowded. But certainly Valletta was designed to be, was one of the first cities in Europe that was designed, it was really planned out and designed to really house a lot of people. And that's part of what makes it really fascinating. So looking at the itinerary of our trip, we'll fly into Rome. That'll be our starting point. We'll spend the first night there, gather everybody together, because of course we'll be flying from different places across Canada. Have a little welcome get together, and then we'll take the Frecciarossa, the express train, down to Naples, where we will embark our ship, the Harmony G. I'll talk about that in a moment, and cross the Tyrrhenian Sea down to the Aeolian Islands. That's these small little islands that are volcanic islands that are just to the north of Sicily. We'll make our way down the east coast of the country, stopping at some very historical, very interesting cities. One last stop in Licata, specifically the Valley of the Temples, before we head across and land in Malta, where we will spend the final 5 nights of our trip, visiting Malta and its sister island of Gozo. So that's where we're going to be going. We leave, of course, May the 12th of next year, and let's talk a bit about what we're going to see on each day of this program. So as I mentioned, we're going to fly into Rome. The nice thing about this trip, it's pretty easy to get to Rome. All paths lead to Rome, as they say. From Toronto, of course, you can fly nonstop, but there's certainly very convenient connections from other cities across Canada. And in Rome, as I often like to do for convenience sake, we're going to be staying quite close to the railway station, Roma Termini, which means that you can fly in, hop on the Da Vinci Express train that takes you straight down into the city center, and literally a very short walk from there. I'll be either I or our local guide will be meeting you and escorting you to the hotel. And if you do fly in, probably you'll arrive in the morning, which means there'll be some time to explore Rome on your own. Usually I go out with some of the members who arrived early enough, and there's lots that we can see that are within walking distance of our hotel. The Colosseum is about a 15-minute walk away. The Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain, all in a sort of a 15, 20, 25-minute walk from our hotel. We can see some of the great sights of Rome, and I find it's a great way to shake off the jet lag after a long flight. Get out, take a walk, and just soak what Rome has to offer in. So it'll be a sort of a relaxing first arrival day, and we'll all get together and have a little welcome dinner near our hotel and be ready in the morning to walk back across the street, as it were, and hop on the express train. Italy has a wonderful train service with these. They look like bullet trains. So in a matter of a couple of hours, we will be arriving in Naples, which is, as I say, just a couple of hours train ride to the south. And Naples, of course, sits in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, and it's quite an interesting city. And from when we arrive at the train station, we'll have a very, very short taxi or coach ride to the port. We'll drop our stuff off, and once again, we'll have some time to explore a little bit of Naples on our own. And from the port, again, we can walk to the Piazza Plebiscito, which is sort of the main starting point for touring around Naples, and wander around the Spanish Quarter and some of these other parts of Naples. So we won't have a chance to go too far afield, but again, the point of this trip isn't Naples in and of itself, but it's nice to get a flavor of these cities, even if you've been to Rome before, or if you happen to have been to Naples, if you've traveled down to the Amalfi Coast. This enables you to get a bit of a flavor. And members often ask me, we'd like to see a bit more of Naples, or maybe we'd like to actually go to Pompeii or some of the areas some of the sites in the area. And of course, you're more than welcome to arrive early and meet us in Naples. That's definitely a possibility. We like to make it so that it works for you. In Naples will be our beautiful yacht, the Harmony G, will be waiting for us. And this belongs to a privately owned company, a family-owned company that I've worked with for many, many years. We have a number of trips that we work with Variety on, and this is one of their flagship vessels. It was built back in the early 2000s and is a very modern-looking ship. And I find it's a nice way to travel because you feel like you're on your own sort of private yacht. She's about 53 meters, about 170 feet long, with 21 cabins on board. And the nice thing is that it's just the right size ship, because even if she were to be totally full, which they seldom are, actually, there's usually a couple of cabins available, although next year we'll see. I know there's a big pent-up demand coming out of this pandemic to travel again. So but there's lots of both interior space, of course, all air conditioned. There's decks where you can sit and relax. And the size of the ship really enables us to be very nimble and moor in ports and in places that you just don't get to on large cruise ships. This is why I'm a big fan of this type of cruising. And we get 3 sumptuous meals a day on board. We have a breakfast buffet, and often a lunch buffet. Sometimes it's served. And then, of course, a lovely a lovely served dinner. So it's a wonderful experience aboard the ship. So our ship will take off probably later in the evening after dinner, and we will make our way first of all to the island of Capri. And you may have heard of Capri before because it's kind of a jet set destination, right? This picture you will have seen. You'll have seen it before. These rocks here, I always have to look at the name because I can't remember, the Faraglioni rocks, with this turquoise water and the steep cliffs. This is kind of what Capri is all about. Of course, you see all those yachts that are sitting in there. Ours will be just one of them. We'll take some time to visit the town of Capri, the Piazzetta, where they have this clock tower that chimes not once an hour, but every 15 minutes. And the magic of Capri is really sitting around in this square, and people watching, because let's face it, there's lots of people watching you, and you can watch them, and it's a very interesting because it caters to the well-heeled travelers from all across Europe. So you see some of the best Italian fashion sitting there sipping on a cappuccino, or having an Aperol spritz or something like that. Weather permitting, if all works out, we'll also make a visit to the Blue Grotto, and this is quite a famous attraction. But it's really there's an amazing history to it, because Tiberius, who was the Roman emperor at the time, had this cave that's this sea cave, adorned with all these incredible statues. They've taken a lot of them out, but there's so much history to it, and that with the white limestone cliffs and the blue waters make Capri really a lovely stop, a great first stop for us on the trip. From Capri, we then head over to one of Italy's other treasures. And if you haven't been to southern Italy before, you really, Positano and the Amalfi Coast will leave you absolutely spellbound. You can just imagine the villages, the town of Positano and the other towns that make up the Amalfi Coast that are just stuck to these very, very steep hillsides. They have, artisans all throughout the streets. It's one picturesque, colorful step after another as you wander around in Positano. And of course, we'll have a guided visit to see some of the highlights, but more importantly, we'll have the time just to soak it all in. And it's almost just as enjoyable to see it from the ship and to be able to look out at this incredible Amalfi Coast. We'll have a wonderful visit there. On the way out of Positano later in the evening, we're going to be passing Stromboli, which is an active volcano. If we're lucky with the weather, typically the rim of the volcano, you can see the glow from the volcanic activity. And so we'll pass Stromboli as we make our way over to the Aeolian Islands, and hopefully catch a bit of a glimpse of one of the few sort of really active volcanoes in the region. Once we get into the Aeolian Islands, our first port of call is going to be Lipari, which is the principal island of the Aeolians. The whole area, the whole chain, the whole archipelago was designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site back in 2000 because of its record of volcanic island building. Like the whole structure of these islands is all obviously from erupted lava and so on. And there's few places that you can see, certainly in the Mediterranean, where it's as evident as how they've really built on these lava flows that have emerged. So we'll take a tour around. We'll visit Quattrocchi, which is one of these quaint little towns. Like so many of the cities that we'll visit, you see these ancient walls that go around it. But of course, everything here is small. It's minuscule in compared to the big cities of Italy. And so there's some fantastic ruins and a castle. So once again, as we'll have at most of the stops along the way, we'll have some time to explore, cruise around on our own at our own speed, and yeah, and see some of this wonderful town. So from here in the Aeolian Islands, we'll then head over to the Sicilian coast. And so we'll definitely have some cruising time where we'll see some of the scenery and some of the other volcanoes along the way. And then we'll hit Taormina. And Taormina is known for, as a couple of these places, known for some of these, the Greek influences, like the amphitheater that you see here at Giardini Naxos, which is a quaint little town that people come to see. This is one of 2 or 3 amphitheaters of this kind that we'll see in Sicily. And so I know that for first timers in this part of, of Europe, you think about, well, this is, you always think about the Roman Empire, but this part of the Mediterranean was really dominated by the Greeks, and that's why Taormina and the Greek amphitheater that's here are such incredible sights to see. The town itself sits on a 200-meter high cliff and is sort of casually referred to as the Saint-Tropez of this part of Sicily. The other thing about Sicily that it's become more prevalent in recent years, and if we go into the liquor store at home, is of course Sicilian wine. And the variety that will be most known to many of you is, of course, Nero d'Avola. If I think back, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, you sort of seldom ever saw Sicilian wine, but it's like so many other wine cultures around the world. It has a long, long history, but it's only sort of been in the last 20, 30 years that these wines have really climbed up the world stage, and particularly the vineyards around Mount Etna, because it's much cooler up there as you get up to 1,000 meters and above. And this has resulted in a character and a quality of wine that is among the finest that you'll find in all of Italy. So we'll have lots of chances to sample some Sicilian wines on this trip. That's for sure. So from Taormina, we continue along and we stop in at Catania. And Catania, once again, sits basically at the base of Mount Etna. So the main reason for going to the city, other than visiting itself, I mean, it has some incredible Baroque architecture, but it's to actually drive around the base of part of Mount Etna itself, visiting the Sylvester Crater, which is high up on the side of the volcano at about 2,000 meters above sea level. And from here, you'll see some of the formations from Etna, which actually erupted last back in about 1983, if my memory serves me correct. So it wasn't even all that long ago when the last major eruption happened. And as a result, there's not many places, I think, in the world that are as accessible as this, where you can see the result of these live volcano flows. And so this is one of the highlights of visiting Catania in this part of Sicily. We continue our journey along the easternmost coast of Sicily, and then we hit the town of Syracuse. This is, of course, the original Syracuse, not the we're more familiar with the one that's in New York State, not far from Toronto. And Syracuse is known as the birthplace of Archimedes, and has once again some absolutely awesome Baroque architecture. This is the main square that we can see in the picture here. And from the city itself, again, many archaeological highlights, but there is some stone quarries there that have these massive carvings that they've made right into the side of the hill. In particular, Orecchio di Dionisio, excuse my Italian pronunciation, the ear of Dionysus, which is a almost perfectly acoustic cave that they've created. And so they say that the gods created this cave so that they could listen to the prisoners that they were being held inside. So you'll notice when you go inside that even if you speak in a soft voice, your voice carries all the way through this cave. Wow, one of these neat things that we like to visit. But once again, we'll have time to enjoy the town itself, have a gelato, have a glass of wine, as we get to soak in all this wonderful Sicilian architecture. Our next stop, and in fact, our last stop on the Italian, in Italy, and on Sicily will be at Licata. So we've now cruised around to the south coast of Sicily. In Licata itself is actually just the port town where we're going to be stopping at, but it is the gateway to the Valley of the Temples. And when you look at the picture and you look at that, that Greek designed building up there that is so reminiscent of the Parthenon in Athens, you'll realize where you're at. And the Valley of the Temples is, again, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that is designated as being one of the most incredible of its kind in all of Italy. So this is really for history buffs on the trip. It is the Temple of the Olympic Jove is what the building is called up there. Is very, very impressive and part of a whole city that has since been overgrown by forests. But we will have a fascinating tour and an insight into the Greek influence in this part of Sicily. So we'll leave Italy at that point on our ship, and we'll then head across the Mediterranean, and bright and early in the morning, and you absolutely have to get up for this. I'll be going around knocking on everybody's door, because when you sail into Valletta, the capital of Malta, it's just one of those experiences that sends a chill down your spine. But Valletta, of course, is a walled city, one of the oldest in Europe, and it's just one of those amazing feelings as you're sailing in on your basically private yacht, or our private yacht. It just sends a chill down your spine. So it's a fantastic way to arrive to end our 8-night yacht adventure that we'll have by coming into Valletta, and we'll disembark the ship, of course. And on our way to the hotel, we'll do our first little sightseeing in and around Valletta. And because we have a whole other day free on the trip, we'll have time to come and explore on your own, because while we'll go up and see the Baracca Garden, which is where basically just to the right of that massive dome, we'll be able to look down over the harbor, and it's one of the most picturesque harbors that I've seen anywhere, not just in Europe. So we'll make a couple other stops, and then head for our hotel, which will be sort of on the northern coast of Malta. Malta is not a huge island. You can get kind of from one end to the other in about an hour's time. So everything is nice and compact and easy to visit. And we'll get a bit of a lecture that evening about Malta and Maltese culture and what it's all about. And it'll also give you a bit of a sense of what you might want to do on your free time that we have on various days on this trip. So the next day we'll head out and we'll visit two major important sites. And Malta, of course, has a tremendous history to it that dates back, frankly, to about 4,000 years before Christ. And one of the spots that we'll visit before we get to Marsiklok, which is this very picturesque fishing village, but we'll visit the three cities where the Knights of St. John first settled back in the 16th century. And of course, the Knights of St. John, a lot of people confuse them with the Knights Templar, which was, of course, sort of quite a nefarious organization. And there's lots of rumors and fiction about this. And Dan Brown wrote about that in some of his novels. So we'll learn all about what the Knights of St. John and the various orders of knights that ruled Malta during this era. We'll have a chance to ride in this little Giazza, a Maltese water taxi, which is what they use to bring sailors and passengers from the shore to these Mediterranean vessels. Marseilles itself is, as you can see from the picture, very, very picturesque. It's known for the fishing boats with their bows that look like eyes, very, very, very colorful. It's a small town, like many of them. So Malta is very dense, but the towns themselves are actually, usually only a few thousand people, and most of them are in the fishing trade. So they have a wonderful fish market here as well. So we'll probably enjoy some fish for those that like seafood when we have lunch there. Our next day, one of the other wonderful sites is we'll take a ferry across to Gozo. So Malta actually consists of 3 islands, and Gozo being the sister island, the smaller of Malta. And it's kind of where the Maltese go to escape the busyness of Malta itself. And it has some fantastic coastline that we'll get a glimpse of as we sail over on the ferry. We'll head to Zlendi Bay and in the Duera Inland Sea. But probably the highlight will be the Cittadella, which is this fortified town sitting up on a promontory, obviously built to protect the citizens of the town from the surrounding invaders, if you will, because you get a great view. It's not a big island. You can see right out to the sea on almost all sides. So we'll have a wonderful day in Gozo, and probably some time there as well to relax, maybe even go for a swim. And the ferries run back and forth all the time to Malta. We'll then have one more day of touring that's part of our trip before we have a free day. And here we'll have to visit Medina. Medina being the silent city that was inhabited originally by the Phoenicians some 4,000 years ago, making literally one of the oldest cities in all of Europe. And it was deemed a silent city. So I love to go to these silent cities. There's no cars, no motorbikes. There's just some horse carriages and the odd delivery vehicle that goes in. So Medina is truly a magical place to visit and wander around. And in the afternoon of that day, we'll visit the other Blue Grotto on the trip. So of course we had the one in Capri, but the Blue Grotto in Malta is a series of 7 caves along the south coast of the island that is blue, not because the grotto itself is blue, but because actually the color of the water is this very, very deep cobalt blue, and something that I know that you'll enjoy very much. We'll have a full day at leisure. I always, as you know, like to include time to explore things on your own. You might head back into Valletta itself, because the sort of half a day that we will have spent there on the first day probably won't do it justice. I can recall my last visit to Malta, just sitting on the side of the harbor, looking up at these huge walls of the fortress, and out at all the boats going in and out. It's just a magical place. You could spend a lot more time there, and maybe some of you will, because as I say, we're contemplating doing a live away program there at some point in the future. So many other things to visit on our free time in Malta, or you might just want to relax, because after that we have to head out and either continue our journey elsewhere in Europe or back home. So that's a summary of our program through Sicily and Malta. I'll just cover a few of the details that you'll find in our brochure about our pricing. There's a great little shot with another yacht in it. That's not ours, but a different one. But you get a sense of where we might be parked while we're there. So the program is available in different categories on the ship, of course. So we've got lower deck, main deck, and upper deck cabins on the Harmony G. And again, the pricing, you'll find it, all the details in the brochure, which if you didn't already get it, you can drop a note to us and we'll shoot it over to you. The program, as with most of our programs, includes pretty much everything. I mean, when we're on board ship, we have all of our meals. We have some wonderful guides through our shore excursions that are all part of the program, as well as in Malta, of course. English-speaking guides there, although English is a very common language in Malta. I mean, certainly everybody speaks Maltese, but it's almost like the second language. So the only thing that's excluded, as is with most of our programs, the airfare is in addition, but we can certainly facilitate that. And I'll talk about that in a second, and insurance and just a couple of other sort of minor items that are not part of the program. Talking about airfare, as I've said on recent webinars, we're not quite sure where it's going to be yet. I'm hopeful that it will stay in the same range as it has been in the past, with round trip airfares being sort of in the low thousands from out of Toronto and a little bit more out of Vancouver, because of course you'll have to transit via a gateway city in Europe. So I see a few questions have already popped in. So Paula and Joel, if there's any more, please let me know. But of course, we're always happy to answer any questions that you might have about this trip following this webinar. So let me address a few of the questions here, right, that have come in now. Helen asks, what are the different cabin sizes? The sizes of the cabins are all relatively close. So there's not a huge difference in cabin sizes. They range sort of from about 13 to about 15, 16 meters. So the primary difference is just the deck that you're on. There's lower deck, main deck, and upper deck. So there's not a huge difference in the cabin sizes, but we can send you a floor plan of the ship so you can understand those a little bit better if you'd like to understand what makes the most sense. Let's see, Troy asked about the weather in May. So it's quite warm. So their seasons are definitely quite far ahead. So in May, we can expect temperatures easily in the mid-20s or even higher. It may be a little bit cooler up in Naples and in Sicily, but generally speaking, the Mediterranean is already warm enough to swim. I mean, it's probably going to be in the low 20s, sort of maybe 2021. So it's not going to be tropical warm by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to be swimmable, and touring-wise, it's perfect temperature. Fran asked about the chances that there be rough waters for sailing. Yeah, I would say there's a 50-50 chance. I mean, we're not going to get like Atlantic type waters in the Mediterranean. In fact, in May, it's generally relatively calm winds. And of course, it's possible anytime to get a thunderstorm or a bit stronger winds that would give rise to heavier seas. And being a smaller vessel, you're likely going to get some movement. So therefore, anybody that suffers from motion sickness, we would highly recommend that you bring some supplements with you. But it's unlikely you're going to get uncomfortably rough seas. That just doesn't usually happen. And so Joanne asked, how agile do you need to be? It's like anywhere, it's walking. That's the primary issue. Some of the places, some of the ruins that we might visit may be a little bit uneven. Certainly Valletta and Malta being quite ancient cities, although the streets are fairly flat, but they're often cobblestone, of course, like a lot of places in Europe. And so I would call it like a lot of our trips, sort of moderately strenuous. It's you definitely need to be able to walk, but we are mindful that we have members sort of from different age categories, and we do try to do it at a pace that we're not going to run your legs off. So Mike asked, are volcanoes covered by travel insurance? Well, that's a good question, Mike. But I would say actually, yes, if a volcano came along and, but the problem is that if you got covered by a volcano, I don't know if travel insurance would help you that much, but yeah, it would be. Let's see, Fran asked, are we likely to run this program again? Yes, we will. Our plan is to run this program each year. Obviously, it depends on our partners that operate the yacht, because they do change their schedules from time to time depending on demand for these programs. But it is our plan, because we anticipated having a full trip this year, which of course has moved to next year, which means that, we'll look to run it again. So if you're not able to join us in May of 2022, because I know some of you are already being bumped on trips from this year, rest assured, we'll be going back to Sicily and Malta. Good. So we've done really well on time today. I thank you all very much for your patience. Oh, I see one more question. Fran asked, where is this picture taken? I'd have to ask Joel about that because I'm not actually sure where he got that picture from. So Joel will send you a note and tell us where the picture came from. Finally, next week, please join us. We're revisiting the fjords of Norway, yet again, a program that we had a full group on for this year, but we're moving forward to next year. This is one of my absolute favorite trips that I've done many, many times. That's next week, April the 22nd at 11 o'clock Eastern time. Please join us for that and learn all about the wonderful trip up and down the Norwegian fjords that we'll be doing in end of April, May of next year. Thanks again for joining me, for listening, and I really appreciate your indulgence with me as I share with you all these wonderful programs that we're doing. I can't wait to see you all again soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day and take care.